You have created your very first Lambda function from the console. You have invoked or triggered this Lambda function by using the test button on the console. This is one way of triggering or invoking the Lambda function. In this lecture, you will learn the other ways of triggering the Lambda function and the different modes in which we can trigger the Lambda function as well. You already know one of the ways, which is to invoke the Lambda function by using the test harness on the AWS console. The second way is to use the AWS CLI, the command line utility that is provided by AWS. We'll be able to run commands from our local machine which can trigger the Lambda. These commands can become a part of a script, and that script can be run to trigger the Lambda or invoke the Lambda as well. Next, we can programmatically trigger the Lambda function from within our application code using SDKs that are provided by AWS. Last and very important, a Lambda can be triggered by events happening in other resources within AWS. That is, if we upload a file to S3 bucket, that can trigger a Lambda function. Or if somebody hits the API gateway URL, that can trigger a Lambda function. Or if something happens in a DynamoDB, that can trigger a Lambda function. And finally, if a message is received on a SNS topic, that message can trigger a Lambda function, and that message can be passed to the Lambda function. So these are called event sources. When an event happens, they will trigger a Lambda function and provide that event. So they become the source of the events. And when these invocations happen from the console or using the CLI or from SDK programmatically or from an event source, there are different modes in which we can invoke a Lambda function. Two different modes, mainly starting with synchronous, where the Lambda function is expected to return a response right away. Examples of synchronous event sources are API gateway, Alexa, CloudFront, and many more. So in lectures later on, you will be creating an API using API gateway, where the end users will be hitting the URLs of the API gateway. The API gateway will trigger the Lambda function. It gets a response right away and it sends it back. If you are using the Amazon's Alexa speaker, then when you use the voice commands against the Alexa speaker, in the back end, it is making calls to Lambda functions that are hosted. It gets the response from the Lambda functions, and that response is what you hear back. So if you're asking for weather or asking for searching something, Alexa speaker is going against the Lambda functions that are already there, developed by AWS. So that communication happens synchronously as well. CloudFront can be used as a front end. You can develop a React, Angular front end, which can trigger Lambda functions in the back end to get the work done against a database or execute some logic and return some data back. So that is the synchronous part of things, where a Lambda function is expected to run and return a response right away. That is one mode or one way in which Lambda functions can be triggered. The second way is asynchronous. This is where a Lambda function won't return back any response. The return type of our Lambda function will be void. In case of Java, an event source will trigger the Lambda function. It will forget about it. The Lambda function will do its work, and it might write to a database or do something else, which is totally up to the application and use case. Example event sources for asynchronous communication or asynchronous triggering or invocation mode are S3. When data is uploaded to a S3 bucket or deleted from a S3 bucket, any event can trigger a Lambda function asynchronously. And it is up to the Lambda function what to do. If it wants to read data from that S3 bucket, it can do it, or it can do something totally different, up to the use case and business requirements. Similarly, a message to a SNS topic can trigger a Lambda function asynchronously. And also cloud formation. When an event happens in cloud formation, like a resource creation in the AWS cloud, resource deletion, and so on, can trigger a Lambda function. These are just some examples. There are many more. You can use CloudWatch log events, etc. to trigger a Lambda function as well. So synchronous and asynchronous are two major types. Then comes the third variation, which is completely different. This is where the Lambda functions are not triggered. Instead, the Lambda service will do polling. It will poll other sources like Kinesis data streams, DynamoDB streams, or the SQS, the simple queue service. So this is the third variation. Instead of synchronously or asynchronously triggering the Lambda functions, we can configure the Lambda service to keep polling these services, the Kinesis data streams. When there is data from Kinesis, it can process the data. And similarly, if the DynamoDB, there is a stream available, our Lambda function will be triggered by the Lambda service, and that will process that data. If there is a message on the SQS, simple queue services queue, then that Lambda service will trigger a particular Lambda. This process is called polling. That is the third variation in which Lambda functions can be triggered. So in the next few sections, you're going to explore the synchronous way of using or triggering Lambda functions, where you will develop a serverless API using the API gateway service in AWS as an event trigger, and backend you will be using DynamoDB. Similarly, you will be working on an asynchronous use case as well, where you will use both S3 and SNS, which will be triggering the Lambda functions asynchronously.